Hello and welcome to the Friday wrap up here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is May 2nd, 2025, and we're looking at Bitcoin as always to start the day with. We actually will take a look at Ethereum and Solana as well today, but we're going to kind of walk through where Bitcoin is right now coming into the weekend, what to look for over the weekend in terms of areas of interest to the upside and downside, and, two bigger events to pay attention to, at least economically, next week in ISM and the Fed meeting. But let's get right into the daily here on Bitcoin. As you can see, Bitcoin is marching to the upside here on the daily, holding on to that upper first standard deviation away from the basis band with a nice Friday close at just under $97,000 with a high coming in just under 98. So, we've hit right around some of the areas that we've spoken of. I would still give it a chance. Now, this is where I've mentioned this many times. Over the weekend, it can kind of go either way. Sometimes it's absolutely dead in terms of volume, and then sometimes we get some bullish news, maybe even from the President of the United States, looking at the big candle right over here. That did exacerbate a move that was already kind of in progress. A lot of people are like, well, it was only because of him. No, it was headed up before he ever posted anything, but it was also coming off of a low being set as well on Saturday. Now, in this case, there is still some lower term time frame room for Bitcoin to move up, but I do think it's getting fairly close. Whether it moves up significantly higher or not, I think it's getting fairly close to the end of this move on the daily before a little bit of a reset. Some might say like, hey, we already kind of got our nice little swing high to swing higher low, set the higher low right there. Sure. That's fair. That's a fair assessment actually. And then maybe we get continuation up to the upper first here around that $100,000. Again, it closes above 96. I'm still looking for the possibility of essentially, swinging this top side of this consolidation up here, which, to be fair, is, it's underneath that that 101 right there by the upper second, but it's 99 to $100,000 between right around 99 and a half, I should say, to around $100,000. The top side of that consolidation prior to the lower low structure that was built out there to begin that downside move to that 74. 420.69. Nice. But it kind of remains to be seen. There are some signs showing, at least on the daily, that things could start to pull back here soon. But let's kind of get into it a little bit here. From the local structure, obviously we have an uptrend. We have two consolidations before moving up. We haven't quite moved up as big as we did out of this consolidation over here. It's kind of been running into some major overhead resistance after getting above $95,000 after this consolidation here in the lower term time frame. So there's been a lot of overhead resistance, which was kind of to be expected. It's right around where we have seen this prior consolidation come in, right? So this is a big area of interest on the charts here for the daily. When looking at a few things here, we do see a cool down occurring while holding above the upper first here. So, if we do see the upper first dropped on a close open, we're likely going to see mean reversion, but I wouldn't be looking like for price to fall towards the basis band too aggressively unless we start to see around $93,000, the bottom side of the consolidation here break down. Then I would look down towards that basis band. It's coming into our important area there, 89 to 92. I'll turn the support and resistance on here in just a moment, but that's the area that I would be looking at on any closes for the daily below 93. If it didn't already test down to 92, here's two basic tests right there to 92. Then it's fair game to go retest that area after all the way down to $88,700, $89,000, which is essentially the top side of this structure over here. Now that would put things below the basis band, but when you have a fairly even set on the bands here for volatility, in terms of mean reversion, we're getting that cool down because price was consolidating, basis band is rising towards price action. If we start to see actual mean reversion from here would be price falling towards that rising basis band, which could very well just be like a range retest here. Really doesn't do much for me, even if it was to come all the way down to the lower first here, which I know is actually it would violate a few of my principles here, but from a volatility level of interest, I would at minimum expect a bigger move off of that lower first. That is typically when you're moving into mean reversion, the lower first is a nice basing area, but it would be kind of wherever that comes from. And that would put it on the top side of this consolidation down here. So we are just looking at this move. Yes, there is the context of all of the other price action over here. But basically drop 93. If it hasn't already tested 92 to 89, I would look for that. Anywhere below there, lower first, right around 85, 86. And we've already kind of talked about this before when just looking purely at support and resistance areas of interest. To the upside, 101's on the board here. That would be getting above our consolidation swing highs here. And of course, that's in another area of overhead resistance between 101 and 104 that we're going to look at in just a moment. Oops, I'm always dropping this thing. All right, so the other thing to note here is we did get a nice little bullish reset on the stochastic momentum indicator. Upside pressure from this particular indicator, which is just basically it's measuring close over close price momentum, but close above 96.6, we'll call it, would keep that turned back to the upside there. Again, it's a weekend. It really could go either way. If the volume's dead, this might flop over again. And it's possible we could see it, a swing higher, even a high put in over the weekend. How would you see a high put in? Closes below the Friday candle. So that would be at 96, 369.69. Nice. Gotta love it. The market really is a meme, huh? And yes, that one's for you, buddy. You know exactly who I'm talking to out there, because boy, oh boy, are you right about that. Especially when it comes to traditional markets as well. Just looking at volume as well in this move up. Yeah, volume since the low has just kind of died off. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a high put in and a correction off of this. It's just a matter of where it corrects to. And I wouldn't be surprised to see, a move towards the top side of the upper second standard deviation on the daily here. When looking at the 12-hour, we did start to see a little bit of etchings of expansion on the closes above the upper first here for the 12-hour, but no real kickoff or expansion. We did see trading above towards that upper third there. What we have is a situation where we got 4-hour expansion into 12-hour compression. So I did point out that 4-hour. We got the expansion on the 4-hour. So we expanded into a compressing 12-hour, which has stalled price right around the key levels. So, we just got to kind of see how that's going to play out. And in fact, this would give us a little bit of an edge here. You can see below the lower second, that would put things around 92.5. So breaking below 93 could still save it there on a swing. But if it starts to close below there, then we're testing 92, right? So, that would be a test of support down there again. And then, of course, for price, we're just kind of looking at above the upper second towards that upper third, which is 99.5 or so. Hey, guess what? That's, I'm sorry, this is 98.5. Sorry, it's $1,000 under here. But, start closing above there, get expansion towards, the high side structures over here at 99, 99.5, and $100,000 there. By those swings and rejections. So that is essentially where we've been looking. Could you call it 100 to 101? Sure. You can just call it that if you want to keep things simple. Now, let's go ahead and take a look even at support and resistance here. Let's go to local. There we go. So above 96, in general, and that upper first on the daily, I am generally going to be looking towards that upper second, right around 101. Still got to work through some of the local resistances here and bigger ones at that. 101 to 104 would be the name of the game, to the 1272 up there. And anywhere above there, I'm looking to where the upper third's starting to come in, around 105 to 106, which is, the double top on a close open. So double top, close open on the highs here. Anywhere above there, it's essentially 106 to 108.4, and then the all-time high and higher at 109.340 and beyond. Um, you know, above 109.340, I've mentioned this before, 113, 114, or you could call it one. We could pull up fibs and stuff. I don't think it's worth even getting into right now. If I start seeing like cracks above 101 to 104, we can start to talk about extensions past the all-time high. But again, I need to see some concrete moves up within this range. And to the downside, pretty simple. Below the $95,000 level here, start looking back towards 93.5 by that weekly higher low close open, and then 93 below there, 92 to 89. And then below there, where we're essentially looking to that lower first to $85,000. So $85,000 to $86,000 top side of this consolidation. Anywhere below there, then we're looking back to the lows essentially. But it's fairly easy to read price. It's just a matter of when do we see a high put in, or is it just going to swing higher, low, and then just keep going? One of the things about a regular stochastic momentum indicator is a lot of people go, oh, well, it's got to come down. This can stay up there for a while in the overbought zone, and it can just kind of flip-flop around in here, and it's bullish, right? So again, this could continue to bullish a reset, maybe even build up bearish divergence within it, which you can play on a regular stoch. When looking at in-trend bearish divergence, we don't have any in-trend bearish divergence just yet. So that's the other thing here is we don't even have one drive of in-trend bearish divergence. Now, when I say in-trend, that doesn't mean that there's not bearish divergence from other areas of price action, like the all-time high over here. Technically, there is bearish divergence. It's not as powerful as the in-trend bearish divergence, and that's when we can start looking for more concrete corrections or correction and then bearish divergence and then another maybe longer form correction. So, it's just something to monitor from there. If we start walking up the timelines, this is still ongoing expansion for the bands here, but we're not seeing it, really in a concrete way. Yeah, it's 99.7, so 100K is right around the highs there. Yeah, so not really seeing anything too different here. So ongoing expansion on the 3-day. Just going to close with the Saturday candle here above the upper second, giving you the upper third as the target there at 101, maybe even slightly above after the close open, depending on where this closes for the Saturday candle. 4-day, not too much here. This is going to close on Monday. Upper seconds right around $99,000 to $100,000. We're right up against that upper first on the 5-day, and you can see that the upper seconds right there at that 104. So, again, this is going to be closing next week, but close above the upper first, and it would give us the volatility levels of interest around 100, 101 to that 104 area up there. Again, just like the weekly, need to see a higher low structure develop after the downtrend break to be bullish. Higher low equal low structure, right? So that's kind of what I'd be looking out for there. And then once we get up to the weekly, we could see that the upper first here is just shy of $99,000. So, and the upper second is up there at 106. So right around the daily double top on a closing basis for the daily. Just stuff to be aware of here. Not too much more to say on this, other than for the weekly, close above, 80,750, looking good. For momentum, the edge of the bullish control zone is right up there at $98,000. So we've already kind of poked at it from the weekly standpoint, in yesterday's high or the Friday high. And, we just got to see some structure develop from here. I wonder where's the SMA? I know we've talked about this, 88,600. So basically 88.7 is kind of that blue line there on the chart. That 1.168 is 88.7. And that was the daily area of interest down here that off of the expansion from the prior accumulation zone last year. We saw the close open of the first bearish candle come in there, and then we saw a first major higher low and a close come in there. And of course, that close open of the right on the 1.168 there was also put in that $85,000 pivot for the lower term time frames that kind of acted as resistance when putting in this lower low down there. So, for the weekly, not too much to say other than, at some point, no matter how high this goes, and I've mentioned this a few times, no matter how high price goes, we have to see healthy structure build, and that's higher low equal low structure as it relates to this last low. So it doesn't matter if this was the high or this was the high, or if we even get a higher high, 114, 115 up here, doesn't matter. We need to see a higher low or equal low as it relates to this last low down here. That would be your reversal setup, that trend reversal setup low. Doesn't mean that it would hit either, because once you get a higher low or equal low, then you need to take out the most recent higher high, which would be this. So we would need to see that for continuation, but at least we would get the trend reversal setup in place, not just a trend break, because that's all we got right now is a downtrend break. I do want to remind everybody for the monthly, talked about this on Monday. Obviously, probably not going to touch on this until next month. The end of this month, right? And that is that we did set the swing low at that 74,420.69, but we did not set the closing low. So, this still is not a solidified structure until we see closes on the monthly above the 95,128 swing high here. You will see, as I mentioned on Monday, you will see a confirmation on most indicators during the month, but we need to see a close above there in order to call it a low. So this would just be another higher low and a series of higher lows and higher highs. So can't fade the trend until the end of the trend, but you can get an idea if the trend is going to end on those lower term timeframes. So we're going to be watching this weekly as it relates to that stuff. We might even start getting into the 5-day for our edge. And of course, we'll keep a close eye on that daily, because the daily is going to give us a lot of information as it relates to all those other time frames, depending on which areas break down and or hold up and which areas are recovered to the upside. So let's move on to talk really quickly about Ethereum and Solana. And in this case, we have ETH right in a very important zone here. Holding above the top side of this weekly level that I've been talking about. It's 1790, but it's right around 1800. Poking at this low right here. We need to see basically between 1860, I think it's 1865 to the high here at 1956, which we have talked about. And then I do think we're good for a move up to 2K, right around $2,000 by this high, to that 2100 overhead resistance. And then of course we want to see 2100 to 2300 on the weekly. For dailies, we want to see 2320 closed above. And again, that doesn't do much. The big twin tower candles for Ethereum is all the way back here at 2555. So, it's got to dig itself out. It's going to take a while. Same's going to be for Solana. And I, for the weeklies, this is fairly straightforward. This is a low set, but it's a lower low. We have to see the lower high taken out and or another lower high before then, and then hold this low and then take out that lower high. But for right now, that last lower high is all the way up here at 2900 essentially. So I would actually be more on the side of we're going to see another lower high. We're going to get everybody really bearish on this structure, and then we have to look for this low to hold, and then higher low, take out the lower high. So, it's something. This is just an example. Something like this, right? Something like that. That does not mean that I think this is going to happen. It could be a more shallow thing, and then it, comes back down here. Point being is a structural change. If it's going to be bullish, it's going to be very difficult for Ethereum to run all the way back here and take out that lower high. Not impossible, but I do think that we could potentially see another lower high in Ethereum, and then we're looking for the higher low, equal low, right? Reversal setup. We're not there yet for Ethereum. This is just barely setting a low here on the weekly. So now we will see this, start to crawl its way out of the oversold zone on closes above 1473 rather on the weekly for Ethereum. So let's go ahead and take a look at Solana. And Solana actually in a better position in terms of trend, breaking this swing down trend already. And then it's kind of like, okay, no matter where this kind of heads up, let's say that this is the high, then we want to see, higher low, equal low structure, right? For Solana develop from there. It is in a better position, but, both Ethereum and Solana's prayers kind of hang on Bitcoin holding up in the recovered range that it's in right now. And 106 is going to be the pivot for the weekly, so it gives it room for retraces. And in fact, a very deep retrace. That's what she said. But that's not a good. That's what she said. But what I will say is this: it gives a lot of room to come back down and test the low after breaking the swing down trend here ever so slightly. I would actually like to see it come up and hit the 169, nice, 170 area by the weekly basis band, but this is going to tick down below that overhead resistance, and then we kind of come back to it from there. For the daily, it's trying to put in a nice high and then swing higher low and closing higher low, but it's just kind of going sideways even. So, we've gotten most of the move that we wanted to see. If we do get another push on Bitcoin, this could easily break out above 157, 160 by the upper second and try for that 169 number, 170 area. But again, just like Ethereum all the way up at 25.55, keep an eye on even on moves up. This 180 up here needs to be closed above. Bitcoin closed above its $95,000 candles, and alts are struggling to keep up with its pace. Obviously, Bitcoin dominance is leading. A lot of it is, ETF inflows, meaning that there are coins coming off the market, and that's what we see, and we've seen consistently since ETF launches. And it's not just the ETFs. This is, exchange reserve balance just plummeting, right? And what happens? The price is going up. So, that doesn't always mean that price is going to go up, but it is one of the primary drivers behind that lately. Volume hasn't been as strong since the ETF launches, which was back here in January, where we saw exchange reserves grow. We had the $49,000 spike coming into, by the way, that was front running the actual launch of the ETFs, and then boom, down to a monthly at 38.5, like directly on a prior cycle monthly close open. So, that's just, something to watch. And something to pay attention to. It's not the be-all, end-all metric, but there's been exchange balance has been falling, and they will continue to fall, I think, in perpetuity, as bigger players in the game are hoovering up coins to resell, package and resell, and find ways to unlock that Bitcoin liquidity via stocks and lending and into companies and debt and all that kind of stuff. So, or equity in some cases. So we'll see kind of how that goes, but. Bitcoin dominance, I think, is going to continue to push on, right? Hit that, it's got above that swing high there, and it's higher lows from here. But I do think in general we will see, U.S. dollar pairs hold up well as long as Bitcoin's holding up well. So if you're in alts, and even in memes, you should be cheering Bitcoin on the upside moves. And when it does move back to the downside, don't get too scared. Just look for the areas that it's going to hold up. That will help you in all of your alts and memes. All right, you have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care. I'll talk to you on Monday.